The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal flower blooming in darkness. Space around it sparkled with ships from across the galaxy. Each vessel carried representatives from worlds humans had never seen before. The station itself stretched 4 miles in every direction. Its transparent walls showed the stars beyond, while inside thousands of beings moved through corridors that defied human understanding. Lisa Grant stood at the observation deck watching the alien ships dock. She wore her best diplomatic uniform, but felt small among the giants that ruled the galaxy behind her. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morrison checked her equipment one final time. The Navy SEAL moved with quiet precision that spoke of years training for impossible situations. Staff Sergeant Amy Brooks adjusted her scope and scanned the docking bay through enhanced vision that could spot threats from incredible distances. The human delegation consisted of only 12 people, compared to the hundreds that other species brought. Lisa carried the hopes of 8 billion humans on her shoulders. She had studied alien cultures for years, preparing for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of being this far from Earth, surrounded by beings that could destroy humanity with a thought. Kate Morrison watched everything with the eyes of a soldier. She noted escape routes, defensive positions, and potential threats. Her team had trained for every scenario their analysts could imagine. They knew the physical capabilities of every species they might encounter. They understood alien psychology, warfare tactics, and cultural taboos. The humans had not come unprepared. The call came through their translators, signaling that the Galactic Council was ready to receive them. Lisa straightened her jacket and led the way through corridors that seemed designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls pulsed with energy that made human skin tingle, while gravity shifted in ways that made walking feel strange. They entered the council chamber and Lisa had to stop herself from gasping. The dome stretched impossibly high above them, filled with floating platforms where alien representatives sat in formations that hurt human eyes. To follow, energy beings drifted like living stars, while insectoid creatures clicked and chittered in languages that bypassed human hearing entirely. Reptilian forms lounged on heated platforms, while others existed as pure thought, given temporary physical form. High Counselor Vex Nina appeared as a pillar of light contained within crystal walls. Her voice reached them without sound, speaking directly into their minds, with words that carried the weight of eons. Welcome humans to the seat of galactic civilization. We have watched your species with great interest and some concern. You have achieved faster than light travel in record time, but your history troubles us. Lisa stepped forward and began the speech she had practiced 1,000 times. She spoke of human achievements in science, art, and philosophy. She described their desire to join the galactic community and contribute to peace among the stars. But even as she spoke, she could feel the skepticism radiating from the assembled beings. A Saurian delegate shifted on his heating platform. Commander Visas was the size of an earth elephant, but moved with predatory grace that made Kate Morrison tense slightly. His yellow eyes fixed on the humans with the intensity of a hunter evaluating prey. Humans wage war constantly, he rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. They fight each other over resources, territory, and ideas. How can beings who cannot achieve peace among themselves bring peace to the galaxy? Other voices joined in expressing doubts about human nature. The Kethmori delegation clicked and chittered among themselves, their 4 armed forms moving in patterns that spoke of barely contained aggression, a luminal energy being flickered with colors that their translators struggled to interpret as disapproval, and concernless responded to each criticism with carefully prepared answers. She acknowledged human flaws while highlighting their strengths. She spoke of human adaptability, their capacity for growth, and their unique perspective that came from overcoming challenges through cooperation and innovation. But the skepticism remained thick in the chamber like a fog that choked hope. Kate Morrison remained perfectly still, but her trained senses cataloged everything. The Kethmori warriors stood 8 feet tall, with natural armor that could deflect most projectile weapons. Their compound eyes missed nothing, while their forearms gave them combat advantages that human tactics manuals had spent years analyzing the Saurians' possessed strength that could crush vehicles, while their hide could turn aside anything short of military-grade explosives. Yet Kate felt no fear, only the calm readiness that came from knowing she and her team had prepared for exactly this scenario. They had studied every species in the chamber, down to their anatomical weak points, cultural taboos and fighting techniques. If diplomacy failed, they were ready for whatever came next. The debate continued for hours, with various species voicing concerns about human aggression, unpredictability, and emotional nature. Some spoke of human wars, while others questioned whether a species that had only recently achieved spaceflight could contribute meaningfully to a civilization millions of years old. Lisa answered each point with patience and dignity, but the tide seemed to be turning against them. High Counselor Vexnina finally called for order. The ancient being had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and her judgment carried enormous weight. Humans, she said, your species shows promise, but also danger. You adapt quickly, perhaps too quickly, for the comfort of established galactic order. Your capacity for violence concerns us, as does your tendency to solve problems through conflict. Lisa felt her heart sink, but forced herself to maintain composure. She had known this might happen. The galaxy was vast and ancient, while humanity was young and untested. Perhaps they would need more time to prove themselves worthy of membership. But then Counselor Zara Vek of the Kethmori rose from her platform. The alien warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, her chitinous armor gleaming under the chamber lights. Her forearms moved in gestures that spoke of barely contained aggression, while her compound eyes fixed on the human delegation with predatory intensity. Kate Morrison recognized the signs immediately. This was no longer about diplomacy. This was about dominance and the demonstration of power. Her hand moved imperceptibly closer to her sidearm, while her team shifted into positions that looked casual, but provided optimal fields of fire and movement. Amy Brooks adjusted her stance slightly, giving her clear sightlines to multiple targets. The moment balanced on a knife edge, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Lisa Grant continued to project diplomatic calm, but inside she knew they were approaching a point where words might no longer be enough. Kate Morrison waited with the patience of a predator, knowing that sometimes the greatest strength lay in perfect stillness, until the moment came to act. The council chamber fell silent as Zaradek prepared to speak, and in that silence, the future of human galactic citizenship hung by a thread that grew thinner with each passing second. Counselor Zaradek stepped down from the Kethmori platform with movements that spoke of deadly grace. Her forearms spread wide in a display meant to show dominance over lesser beings. The chitinous plates that covered her body gleamed like black metal, while her compound eyes reflected the chamber lights in thousands of tiny fragments. Each step she took echoed through the vast space like the footfalls of an approaching storm. The Kethmori were known throughout the galaxy as the ultimate warrior race. They had conquered their home system through pure physical might, and their honor code demanded that strength be proven through combat. Their society respected only those who could fight and win against impossible odds. To them, weakness was the greatest sin, and diplomacy was merely what the weak used when they lacked the courage to fight. Zara Dek looked down at the human delegation with barely concealed contempt. These soft mammals had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs, no ability to survive in the vacuum of space without artificial protection. They were small, fragile, and dependent on tools for everything from combat to basic survival. How could such pathetic creatures claim to deserve a place among the rulers of the galaxy? She gestured with 2 of her arms toward Lisa Grant, while keeping the other 2 ready for combat. These humans speak of peace and cooperation, but what they really offer is weakness. They cannot fight honorably because they lack the physical capability. They hide behind technology because their bodies are too frail for real combat. They seek membership in our council, not from strength, but from desperation. The other species in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. Many had their own concerns about human nature, but the Kethmori approach to problem-solving made even hardened warriors nervous. Zara Thek continued her speech with growing intensity while her body language became more aggressive with each word. "Look at them," she declared, pointing directly at Kate Morrison. "They send their warriors to guard their diplomat, but these warriors carry artificial weapons instead of relying on natural strength. They wear armor made by machines instead of growing it from their own bodies. They are parasites who depend on tools because evolution found them unworthy of real power." Lisa Grant tried to respond with diplomatic language about human innovation and adaptability, but Zara Thek cut her off with a dismissive gesture that bordered on insulting. The alien warrior began to pace back and forth in front of the human delegation, like a predator circling wounded prey. Her forearms moved in complex patterns that spoke of barely contained violence. Kate Morrison watched every movement with the trained eye of someone who had studied Kethmori combat techniques for years. She knew that their forearmed fighting style made them incredibly dangerous in close combat, while their natural armor could turn aside most conventional weapons. But she also knew their weaknesses, the gaps in their armor, the pressure points that could disable them, and the psychological triggers that could make them careless. The chamber atmosphere grew thick with tension as other species began to react to Zara Thek's aggressive display. The Saurians hissed among themselves, while the luminal energy beings flickered with patterns that indicated alarm. Several smaller species moved their delegations further from the developing confrontation, while others leaned forward with the anticipation of beings who enjoyed watching others fight. Staff Sergeant Amy Brooks kept her eyes moving between potential threats, while maintaining the appearance of casual alertness. Her sniper training had taught her to read body language from incredible distances, and every alien in the chamber was broadcasting their intentions through movement, posture, and subtle positioning. She could see which ones were preparing to intervene, which ones were looking for exits, and which ones were hoping for violence. Zara Thek's voice grew louder as she warmed to her subject. "Humans have no honor," she declared. "They fight wars with explosives that kill from distances where courage means nothing. They use projectile weapons that require no skill or strength. They employ tactics that avoid direct confrontation because they know they would lose in any fair fight. Their entire military philosophy is based on avoiding the very tests that prove worthiness." High Counselor Vex Nina attempted to restore order, but her ancient authority seemed to have little effect on the Kethmori warrior. Zara Thek was entering the state that her people called battle rage, where the desire to prove dominance through combat overwhelmed all other considerations. This was a psychological condition that had helped the Kethmori conquer their enemies, but made them dangerous to friend and foe alike. The situation deteriorated further when Zara Thek began to describe Kethmori military victories in graphic detail. She spoke of enemies crushed beneath their forearmed assault of armor that turned aside every weapon, of warriors who fought until their hearts stopped beating rather than accept defeat. Each story was meant to demonstrate the superiority of natural strength over human technological dependence. Lisa Grant maintained her diplomatic composure, but Kate Morrison could see the strain beginning to show. The Doctor had prepared for political opposition and cultural misunderstandings, but this level of personal aggression was pushing the boundaries of what diplomacy could handle. The alien warrior was clearly building toward some kind of direct challenge that could destroy any hope of peaceful resolution. Other council members began to voice their own concerns about the deteriorating situation. Commander This of the Saurians rumbled warnings about maintaining order, while several energy beings pulsed with patterns that indicated extreme displeasure. A few smaller species had already begun moving their delegations toward the exits. Clearly sensing that violence was becoming inevitable, Zara Thek seemed to feed on the growing tension. Her movements became more aggressive while her voice took on the tone that Kethmori used just before attacking. The compound eyes that covered her head reflected the chamber lights in ways that made her look like a living constellation of hostile stars. Her forearms began to move in the ritual patterns that preceded formal combat. Challenges. Kate Morrison felt the familiar calm that came over her in dangerous situations. Time seemed to slow. As her training took over, she could see the exact moment when Zara Zek would make her move, could predict the angle of attack, and had already calculated the optimal response. Her team was ready, though they maintained the appearance of diplomatic guards rather than combat specialists preparing for action. The breaking point came when Zara Dek focused her attention directly on Kate Morrison. Something in the human warrior bearing triggered the alien predatory instincts. Perhaps it was the way Kate stood perfectly still, while radiating controlled lethality, or maybe it was the complete absence of fear in her eyes. Whatever the cause, Zara Vek recognized a fellow warrior, and her honor code demanded that strength be tested through combat. You, she said, pointing to arms at Kate, while keeping the other two ready for fighting. You smell of battle and death. You move like someone who has killed before. Face me, human, and show this council whether your species has any warrior spirit, or if you are all cowards hiding behind machines and diplomacy. The challenge hung in the air like an electric charge, waiting for a lightning strike. Every being in the chamber understood that they had passed beyond the realm of words into something far more primitive and dangerous. The fate of human membership in the galactic community now rested on the outcome of a confrontation that no amount of preparation could have entirely predicted. Kate Morrison stepped forward with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable with violence. Her movement was neither aggressive nor defensive, but something far more dangerous, a perfect readiness that spoke of absolute confidence in her abilities. The two warriors faced each other across a gap that seemed to contain the future of two civilizations. The council chamber fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the space station systems became audible. Every alien representative focused their attention on the two warriors facing each other in the center of the vast crystalline dome. Zara Vek towered over Kate Morrison by more than 2 feet, while her forearms and natural armor made her appear invincible to beings who had never seen human combat techniques in action. Kate Morrison stood with the relaxed posture of someone completely comfortable with danger. Her hands hung loose at her sides while her breathing remained steady and controlled. She had faced death in a dozen different forms during her military career, and this moment felt no different from any other mission where violence was a possibility. The alien warrior, impressive size, and natural weapons were simply factors to be considered, and overcome. Zara Dek began to circle Kate with the predatory grace of a hunter testing its prey. Her compound eyes studied every detail of human anatomy, looking for weaknesses to exploit, while her forearms moved in patterns designed to confuse and intimidate opponents. The Kethmori fighting style relied on overwhelming adversaries with multiple simultaneous attacks that few beings could counter effectively. High Counselor Vex Nina made one final attempt to restore order, the ancient energy being pulsed with authority that had commanded respect for millennia. Counselor Zara Vek, she commanded in a voice that resonated through multiple dimensions, this is not the place for combat challenges. We are here to discuss membership, not to settle disputes through violence. But Zara Dek was beyond listening to reason. The battle rage that made her species such feared warriors had taken hold, and nothing short of physical confrontation would satisfy her need to prove dominance. She continued circling Kate, while her voice carried the ritual words that preceded Kethmori combat. I challenge this human to single combat. Let us see if their species possesses any warrior spirit, or if they are merely parasites who depend on tools because their bodies are too weak for honorable fighting. Kate exchanged a quick glance with Lisa Grant, and saw the diplomat give an almost imperceptible nod. This had moved beyond anything that words could solve, and sometimes the only way to earn respect was to demonstrate strength. The human delegation had known this moment might come, and had prepared accordingly. Except, Kate said, in a voice that carried clearly through the vast chamber. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of absolute confidence that made several alien species shift uncomfortably on their platforms. This small human female showed no fear of an opponent who could tear most beings apart with her bare claws. The aliens began to murmur among themselves as they observed this unprecedented situation. Some expressed excitement at finally seeing human combat capabilities, while others worried about the diplomatic consequences if their newest applicant species was humiliated. The saurians hissed with anticipation, while energy beings flickered with patterns that indicated intense interest. Zara Vek stopped circling and faced Kate directly. The alien warrior spread all four arms wide in a display meant to demonstrate her overwhelming physical advantages. Her chitinous armor gleamed under the chamber lights, while her height made her appear like a living monument to the power of natural selection over human frailty. But something in Kate's steady gaze triggered a response that Zaradek had not expected. The human showed no signs of intimidation, fear, or uncertainty. Instead, she radiated the calm confidence of someone who had analyzed every aspect of the situation and found it manageable. This lack of proper submission enraged the Kethmori warrior beyond all reason. Without warning, Zaradek attacked her warrior pride, overwhelmed any pretense of formal combat protocols as she launched herself forward with one of her primary arms extended in a devastating strike. The blow was aimed at Kate's head and carried enough force to shatter stone. The alien compound eyes tracked the attack with predatory satisfaction as she anticipated crushing this insolent human. What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Kate Morrison did not dodge the incoming strike. Instead, she moved to intercept it with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training against exactly this type of attack. Her left hand caught Zaradek, striking arm at the wrist, while her fingers found the exact pressure point between chitinous plates that Kethmori anatomy experts had assured everyone did not exist. The effect was immediate and devastating. Zaradek's entire arm went numb as human fingers pressed against nerve clusters that evolution had supposedly protected. The alien warrior compound eyes widened in shock as she realized that this small human not only knew Kethmori anatomy better than most Kethmori but had trained specifically to exploit weaknesses that her own people considered myths. While Zaradek was still processing this impossible development, Kate's right hand drove upward in a palm strike that connected with the solar plexus equivalent in Kethmori physiology. The blow was delivered with the full force of human muscle density optimized by millions of years of persistence hunting, and it found the one spot where Kethmori natural armor offered no protection whatsoever. The 8-foot alien warrior doubled over in agony as human bone and muscle delivered kinetic energy to nerve centers that had never experienced external trauma. Zaradek remaining 3 arms flailed wildly as her body tried to process pain signals that her species' evolutionary history had not prepared her for. Kate flowed into her next movement with the fluid grace of someone who had rehearsed this exact scenario countless times. She used Zaradek's own momentum and superior height against her, executing a textbook hip throw that sent the massive warrior crashing to the crystal floor with an impact that resonated through the chamber like thunder. Before Zaradek could recover, Kate had secured a joint lock on the alien primary arm that kept her completely immobilized despite her 3 remaining limbs. The human positioning was geometrically perfect, and any movement from the alien would result in structural damage. 2 joints that could not be easily repaired. Throughout the entire engagement, Kate's expression had not changed. She showed no anger, excitement, fear, or satisfaction. Only the cold professionalism of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario. Her entire adult life, the alien warrior who had dominated battlefields across multiple star systems lay helpless on the floor, controlled by a being half her size who had defeated her in less time than it took most beings to blink. The council chamber existed in a state of absolute silence. Every alien representative stared in shock at the impossible sight before them. Their most feared warrior species champion had been neutralized by a human female using nothing but knowledge, training, and the kind of precise violence that spoke of military science developed to lethal perfection's era. Vek, compound eyes, stared up at Kate with an expression that might have been respect if alien psychology could be properly translated. The Kethmori warrior had spent her entire life believing that natural advantages were superior to artificial training, but now, she lay defeated by someone who had turned preparation and knowledge into weapons more effective than claws or armor. Kate maintained her hold for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to prove her point, but not long enough to cause permanent damage. Then she released the alien and stepped back, offering her hand to help Zara Thek to her feet. The gesture was simple, but it carried implications that would echo throughout galactic civilization for centuries to come. Zara Thek stared at the offered hand for several heartbeats before accepting the assistance. The Keth Mori warrior had never experienced defeat in personal combat, and the sensation left her compound eyes, reflecting confusion, along with something that might have been the beginning of respect. She rose to a full height, but somehow seemed smaller than before, as if the encounter had fundamentally changed her understanding of her place in the universe. Kate Morrison helped the alien to her feet with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the brief fight. Her expression remained neutral while her stance indicated readiness to respond if the situation escalated further. But something in Zara Thek's posture suggested that the moment for violence had passed, replaced by a different kind of recognition. The council chamber remained locked in stunned silence, as thousands of alien minds tried to process what they had witnessed. The implications were staggering beyond immediate comprehension. This was not simply one warrior defeating another, but a complete overturning of assumptions that had governed galactic civilization for millions of years. High Counselor Vex Nina energy form flickered with patterns that had not been seen since the formation of the council itself. The ancient being had witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, but never seen such precise, efficient violence delivered with such perfect control. The human had demonstrated capabilities that suggested their species possessed military science far beyond what anyone had imagined. Commander Visas of the Saurians was the first to break the silence, his massive form shifting on the heated platform as he processed the tactical implications. How he rumbled in a voice like distant earthquakes. How did your warrior know our anatomy? Your species has only recently achieved spaceflight, yet you moved like you had fought. Keth Mori. Before Kate Morrison response was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to discuss weather conditions. I had, she said simply. In simulation thousands of times we studied Keth Mori, physiology, combat techniques, and cultural practices. Every member of my team is prepared to face any council species in combat, if necessary. This revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives that made the previous surprise seem trivial. The humans had not stumbled blindly into first contact, but had arrived with detailed knowledge of every species they might encounter. They had prepared for war while hoping for peace. And that combination represented a strategic philosophy that none of the established powers had anticipated. Deluminal energy being pulsed with colors that strained translation protocols while several smaller species began urgent communications among themselves. The implications were becoming clear to military minds throughout the chamber. These humans had studied galactic civilization with the thoroughness of generals preparing for invasion, while maintaining the diplomatic facade of peaceful applicants. Zara Thek flexed her forearms, testing for damage, and finding only minor bruising where Kate had applied pressure to nerve clusters that Keth Mori, medical science insisted, were impossible to target externally. She looked at the human warrior with compound eyes that reflected new understanding. You knew exactly where to strike, she said in a voice carrying undertones of amazement. How many of my people weaknesses? Do you understand all of them? Kate replied without hesitation. Your species broadcasts combat footage as entertainment. We analyzed fighting techniques, anatomical vulnerabilities, and tactical doctrines. Your honor code makes you predictable, while your reliance on natural advantages makes you unprepared for opponents who have studied your methods. The alien warrior absorbed this information while her worldview underwent fundamental reconstruction. The Keth Mori had conquered their enemies through superior physical capabilities, but these humans had turned study and preparation into weapons more effective than natural armor or multiple LIMS-DR Lisa Grant stepped forward to address the stunned council while maintaining her diplomatic composure, despite the revolutionary implications of what had just occurred. "Honorable representatives," she said, in a voice that carried clearly through the vast chamber. "You have expressed concern about human aggression and unpredictability. What you have witnessed is neither Lieutenant Commander Morrison demonstrated precision control and restraint. She could have killed Counselor Zaradek in that first moment, but chose not to. This statement rippled through the assembly like a stone dropped into still water. Species that had ruled the galaxy through natural advantages suddenly realized they were looking at something entirely different. The human had not simply won a fight, but had demonstrated the capacity for violence so precise and controlled that mercy became an act of superiority rather than weakness. Say, delegation of insectoid beings clicked and chittered among themselves while their translation devices struggled to convert concepts that had no equivalent in their language. The idea of deliberately restraining lethal capability was alien to species that had evolved as either predators or prey, but never as something that could choose to be either. High Counselor Vexnina form brightened as understanding began to penetrate layers of assumption that had governed her thinking for eons. Your species approaches conflict as a science rather than an expression of natural capability, she observed with something approaching awe. You have made yourselves into weapons while retaining the wisdom to choose when not to use that capability. Lisa Grant nodded, while her diplomatic training helped her navigate the treacherous currents of galactic politics that were shifting beneath her feet. We do not seek membership out of need, but out of desire to contribute. Humanity offers something unique to the galactic community: our ability to adapt, to learn, and to overcome any challenge through preparation and determination. The council members began to understand that they were witnessing a species unlike any they had encountered before. These humans possessed the capacity for violence that could threaten any established power, but had chosen to pursue membership through diplomatic means. They had prepared for war while hoping for peace, and that combination represented a maturity of strategic thinking that impressed even ancient civilizations. Zaradek continued to study Kate Morrison with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that challenged everything she believed about strength and weakness. Your people are not what they appear to be, she said finally. There is predator beneath the diplomat. Kate first smile of the entire encounter appeared. We are exactly what we appeared to be, she replied. We are adaptable. The implications of this exchange began to filter through the council chamber as representatives realized that humanity had just redefined the rules of galactic civilization. These beings did not rely on natural advantages or technological superiority, but on something far more dangerous: the ability to make themselves capable of anything through study, preparation, and sheer determination. Commander Thesis leaned forward on his platform, his reptilian features showing something that might have been respect. If this is what your diplomats can do, he asked, in a voice that carried undertones of concern, what are your actual soldiers like? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap, while every military mind in the chamber began to contemplate implications that chilled them to their core. If human diplomatic security could defeat the galaxy premier warrior species, then what capabilities did their dedicated military forces possess? The answer was too terrifying for most beings to consider, but the evidence suggested that humanity had just announced themselves as the most dangerous species in known space. Kate Morrison maintained her calm expression, while the fate of galactic civilization balanced on the edge of a new understanding. Her simple statement had revealed that humanity possessed capabilities that could reshape the balance of power throughout the stars. The council would never be the same. The silence that followed Commander This question stretched through the council chamber like a living thing. Every alien representative felt the weight of implications that could reshape galactic civilization forever. If human diplomatic security possessed such devastating capabilities, then their actual military forces represented a threat that no established power had prepared to face. High Counselor Vex Nina energy form pulsed with patterns that had not been seen since the ancient wars that established galactic order. The being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations now faced something unprecedented, a species that had mastered the art of war while choosing the path of peace, but retained the capacity to unleash destruction beyond imagination. Dr. Lisa Grant recognized the moment when everything balanced on the edge of decision. The Council could choose to welcome humanity as equals, or they could unite against what they perceived as a threat, but either choice would acknowledge that the galaxy had fundamentally changed with human arrival. "We came here seeking partnership," she said in a voice that carried the dignity of someone representing 8 billion souls. "Humanity does not wish to dominate or conquer. We seek to contribute our unique perspective to galactic civilization. We offer our knowledge, our adaptability, and our commitment to finding solutions through cooperation rather than conflict." Sarah Vex stepped forward, her forearms moving in gestures that spoke of newfound respect rather than aggression. "I withdraw my objections to human membership," she declared, in a voice that carried clearly through the vast space. "This species has proven their warrior spirit while demonstrating the wisdom to choose restraint over destruction. They possess the strength to command respect and the discipline to earn trust." The Keth Mori announcements sent ripples of shock through species that had never heard their premier warrior admit to being outmatched. If beings who conquered through pure physical might acknowledged human superiority, then the implications were too significant to ignore. Commander Thesis of the Saurians shifted his massive bulk while contemplating strategic realities that his military training forced him to acknowledge. "Humans," he rumbled thoughtfully, "have demonstrated that knowledge and preparation can overcome any natural advantage. They study their potential opponents with scientific precision, then develop tactics specifically designed to exploit discovered weaknesses. This represents a revolution in military thinking." Other voices began to join the discussion as representatives realized they were witnessing a historic moment. The insectoid delegates clicked among themselves while their translation devices worked to convert concepts of disciplined violence into forms their hive minds could process. Energy beings flickered with patterns that indicated intense analysis of human capabilities. Small mammalian species that rarely spoke in council sessions raised their voice in the growing chorus. "These humans possess something we have never encountered before," she said in tones that carried across the chamber. "They have made themselves into apex predators through choice rather than evolution. They represent controlled lethality that can be directed with surgical precision." The debate that followed was unlike any in galactic history. Species after species rose to acknowledge that humanity had fundamentally altered the balance of power. Simply by demonstrating their capabilities, the galaxy would never again be able to ignore the implications of a species that could adapt to overcome any challenge. High Counselor Vex Nina finally called for order, as the ancient being prepared to render judgment that would echo through the ages. "Humans," she said in a voice that resonated across multiple dimensions, "your species has proven worthy of membership through demonstration. Rather than words, you possess the strength to protect galactic civilization and the wisdom to use that strength responsibly." The formal vote was unanimous, but the real decision had been made in those 2 seconds when Kate Morrison demonstrated that humanity was not seeking membership from a position of weakness, but from a position of strength tempered by choice. The galaxy had gained new members who could stand as equals with any existing powers. The human delegation prepared to leave Nexus Prime. The conversations that followed would reshape galactic military doctrine. Species that had dismissed human capabilities began urgent reassessments of their strategic positions, while others sought to understand how beings without natural weapons could become the most dangerous predators in known space. Saravek approached Kate one final time, her compound eyes reflecting something that transcended the traditional Kethmori understanding of strength. "I would be honored to train with your warriors," she said, in a voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance. "Your species has redefined what it means to be Kate smiled with genuine warmth for the first time since entering the chamber. "The honor would be ours, counselor. Your people fight with courage that legends are made of. Our training methods combined with Kethmori warrior spirit could benefit both our species." The exchange represented more than diplomatic courtesy. It symbolized the beginning of a new era, where traditional concepts of power would be challenged by human adaptability. The galaxy was about to discover that cooperation with humanity offered advantages that conquest never could. Garlisa Grant led her delegation through corridors that seemed less intimidating than before. The aliens they passed looked at the humans with new understanding. These were not the desperate supplicants they had appeared to be, but equals who had chosen diplomacy over dominance while retaining the capacity for either in the depths of space aboard ships belonging to dozens of different species. Military planners began to ask questions that chilled them to their cores. If human diplomatic security could defeat the galaxy premier warriors, then what capabilities did their dedicated military forces possess? The answer was too terrifying for most beings to contemplate. The phrase that would define human reputation throughout galactic civilization began to spread through military channels. Humans do not have claws or armor or energy manipulation. They have something worse. They have discipline. Distant worlds, strategic computers began running simulations that all reached the same conclusion. Any species that attempted to threaten humanity would face opponents who had studied their weaknesses with scientific precision and developed countermeasures with military efficiency. The galaxy had gained protectors who could stand against any threat while choosing to preserve peace through strength. Kate Morrison stood at the observation deck watching alien ships maintain respectful distances from the human vessel. The message had been delivered and received. Humanity was no longer an unknown quantity seeking acceptance, but a known power that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The stars looked different now, filled with possibilities rather than threats. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous predators were not those born with natural weapons, but those who made themselves capable of anything through preparation, determination, and the wisdom to choose their battles. Carefully as the human delegation departed Nexus Prime, they carried with them not just membership in galactic civilization, but something far more valuable. They had earned respect, fear, and most importantly, the understanding that humanity represented evolution guided by intelligence rather than limited by biology. The galaxy would never be the same, and in the depths of space among species that had ruled through natural advantages for millions of years, a new understanding was taking hold. The age of humanity had begun.